I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Today, my guest is Evan Schuman, freelance journalist for a long time, working at places like VentureBeat, ComputerWorld, CXO Media. You know, he's the CEO of the content firm. Evan, you're doing a lot. I know you're in between deadlines right now as we're recording, so thank you for being generous with your time,
Oh, my
squeezing
pleasure.
me in. Yeah. And you're not too far from me. You're in New Jersey too, just like me, which is kind of cool. We could have met
Well,
in
I
person.
would encourage you to not say that again. There still are slander laws in this country.
That's funny. That's funny. And you actually done a lot of privacy and legal issues in addition to technology. What are you most focused on right now? Like when you talk about slander laws, and I all of a sudden I think about Elon Musk and Twitter in Brazil, or X in Brazil, or what's going on with Telegram in France. There's this whole intersection right now between technology and legal. How are you thinking about that?
Well, most of it really depends on what I'm working on. Most of the things I work on would be enterprise IT and cybersecurity. So I think of privacy in terms of compliance issues, how it's going to affect our readers, and all the rest of that fun. So that's pretty much how I look at it. And one of the issues with privacy is that a lot of companies have far less awareness than they need to as to what data they are grabbing. This is particularly the issue with the cloud, with various partners. They're doing so IoT, they're doing so many things. They don't even know what data they're gathering, what data is being shared. And that's just causing lots of compliance and, for that matter, cybersecurity headaches.
I think about the whole issue around cyber insurance, and there's been a lot of talk about the the pricing is so wrong. The pricing is underpricing the risk that's involved. Because like you said, most companies, they don't even know what they're storing, where it is, what they could be liable for, what the risk is. And so that business in terms of the insurance side of it is just not at all properly pricing in the amount of risk that's behind the scenes there.
Well, it's even worse than that. One of the things that I'm anticipating is that for the typical enterprise, cyber insurance is most likely going to go away for a bunch of reasons within the next 4 or 5 years. And it's to the point you're making. The risk is so vast that a lot of these insurance companies are trying to minimize what they're going to cover and maximize what they're going to charge for that insufficient coverage. And it's just going to get to a point where, and a lot of companies are getting out of cyber insurance entirely. So there are not going to be many players offering it, and the pricing is going to get very unattractive for customers. So they're going to look elsewhere, including self insurance, which has been a big corporate issue with healthcare for years.
You know, you just wrote the other day in Computer World an opinion article, Gen AI vendors self-destructive habit of overpromising. Is that really specific to just Gen AI?
No, no, it's certainly the overpromising has been the case for a while, but Gen AI right now is so prevalent and is being focused on so much, and the lies are so over the top in so many of these ways. And again, it's there's a lot of footnote to that. Are they lying, or are they saying what they actually believe? And so if they actually believe it, it's not a lie. It's wrong, but it may not get to a lie. I think a lot of these companies, it is a lie because they know more than they claim, so they know absolutely how incorrect their utterances are, their promises are.
Talk about your own path. How did you get here? What is everything that you're doing? When I look up at your LinkedIn profile, I see so many different types of jobs in terms of editor in chief here, reporter there, VP here, moderator here, freelance here, CEO there, columnist. You're very busy. How
Well,
did you get
I would
so busy?
well, first of all, without even getting into the busy issue, I would take a different interpretation
Okay.
of what you just said,
Okay.
which is, to me, all I have been since I was, I think my first published pieces were when I was like 14. All I have been my entire career, my entire life has been a storyteller. And all the roles you mentioned, whether it's moderating, whether it's writing, whether it's editing, whether it's overseeing content projects, it's all storytelling. What's the best story we can tell here? Who is the audience? You got to tailor your story to the audience, and what works. So if you think about it as a storyteller, it's just been one job, just different tweaks along the way.
I like that approach. Yeah, it would be like an actor would have so many different gigs over 25 years, but the function that they've had is the same thing, but it's different gigs along the way. So I can see that you're just a storyteller in all the forms that it can take.
Right. And then if you take the entertainment example you just mentioned, a lot of actors get frustrated with the scripts, and you'll see a lot of some of the major talent out there also writing their shows, and a lot of those talent will then be directing shows, directing films. And you look at it, well, director entirely different from writer, entirely different from actor, and they're essentially going to say, I'm just telling a story, but these are the various ways to do it, and I want to explore all of them. So it's the same thing. We're both storytellers. I just their stories are just much more entertaining than mine.
Yeah, how did you get into B2B enterprise tech? How did that end up for you?
Oh, that's a very, very, very heartwarming tale. Someone gave me a lot of money to do it. That was it. It's essentially as heartfelt as it gets. No, when I was a daily newspaper reporter for years, and the publication had been purchased. There were extensive rumors about massive layoffs, and there was a lot of concrete behind those rumors. And as people started getting laid off, I started figuring, well, I've got to feed my family somehow, and I took a job with a B2B publisher in New York. It was a CMP Publications at the time, and then CMP Media, and then, well, they just went away entirely.
They just went away entirely.
Well, they got acquired, and the name went
that
away.
Sounds better. Getting acquired sounds better than they went away entirely. That sounds like they went bankrupt.
They did both. They got acquired, and they took the money, and then went away entirely. So.
Oh, geez. How did you get that job, though? Did you have any business experience or tech experience? How did you just win among many, let's say, many people who wanted to get that same job?
Going back to that point, well, first of all, I did what it's called a gradual transition to pure unadulterated evil. I was a traditional reporter in daily newspapers on the city desk, and then I got an opportunity to move with a couple of my colleagues to the business desk. This publication had extensive business coverage, so I moved there. And one of my beats within the business desk was technology. So I was already writing about technology and related issues in that job. So when I got contacted by someone from CMP, I already had that experience, lots of technology clips. So it was not as significant a departure as you might expect. I was obviously on writing for a B2B rather than a consumer title. The technology gets much more deep. But I'd already been telling those tales of technology. So, again, wasn't a big departure.
What's been your experience writing for B2B? Because it's such a unique beast, right? In terms of the content, the approach, the types of stories that do better or worse. I think most regular people in the real world don't understand how a B2B technology media publication would work. What are the myths that you tend to have to break?
Well, I don't see that many myths. I view it very simply, which is that, again, storyteller. In this instance, what a storyteller has to do is understand not just the story they're telling, but the audience they're telling it to. So the only shift when I went from the dailies to B2B with CMP is that my audience changed, and I had to understand that audience. What do they know? What do they not know? What do they care about? What technical level do they need the information presented? So that was, once it's the same story, I just tweaked the audience because the audience was different. Then you just tweak the stories for that audience. It's not rocket science. It's not particularly complicated.
It's just computer science, not rocket science.
It's not science at all. It's You're going to get bored of my saying it, but it's just storytelling. I swear to God, that's all it is.
What all right, let's put it this way. What are the stories right now that you're most excited about?
Okay, well, I'll put this into proper context. I haven't been excited about a story since the 1980s, so let's just accept that. You don't get excited about B2B stories for IT and security execs. You know, you do the job, but I don't consider it especially exciting. Which is, one of the ongoing discussions I have with PR people, whether it's internal to a vendor or with agencies, is that they say, well, we've got some really exciting. A, no, you really don't. And number two, that's not what we're going for anyway. We want something that will grab the reader's attention, tell them something, A, that they don't know, and that pushes back against what they think they do know. That's how you grab their attention. That's how you deliver value to the reader. So that's the kind of stories we're looking for. And we often have them using words like exciting. Once they use the word exciting, or I swear to God, I've had multiple people use the horrible cliche, knock your socks off. Once they say anything like that, my brain says, okay, this is not going to go anywhere. Let's just end this quickly.
This is great. So I agree with you because I deal with a lot of these companies that are saying these kinds of words. Or what gets me is when companies say this is a sexy story, and I'm just thinking,
No, it's not.
That's not. That's as far away from that word as humanly possible.
Well, I would offer one pushback. It's probably not a sexy story, but it depends on how that person defines sexy. For example, if they're an engineer, engineers define sex very differently than actual mammals. So you've got to you got to understand the person speaking those words. But yes, in general, it's not going to be that.
So knock your socks off. Exciting. What are the other red flag buzzword killers that will turn you off immediately from engaging further?
It's not the buzzwords per se, although those certainly don't help. It's I ask specific questions, and when they don't answer them, when they pretend to not hear what I'm asking so they can say something else, it's like, no, you're not a politician. You don't get to say whatever you want to say that has nothing to do with the question you're asked. So if I ask a question, what about blah, blah, blah? And if they ignore the question and say what they want, I may say, all right, let me ask it again. Maybe you didn't hear me. We're trying to figure out blah, blah, blah. And then if they again don't answer it, we're done. So that's the thing that I usually tell anyone working with, that the first thing when dealing with a journalist, it's really easy. Listen to the question and directly address it. And by the way, that answer might be no comment, but at least that's a direct response. It's when you say something irrelevant to the question, I have no idea what's in their heads. Are you thinking we're not going to notice that you didn't answer the question? Because, we typically are more awake than that, but
I think what they've been advised is they'll notice you didn't answer the question, and they'll run out of time, and they won't keep asking you because they have to hit their deadline and move on.
Well, okay. We're talking about two different things. Your example is talking about you're doing an interview.
Right. Let's say you're doing an interview. Let's say we're going to sit down for 20 minutes, and at some point we're just going to run out the clock, and you have to go do other stuff.
Well, right, but that's in an interview. That's a different dynamic. I'm talking about, and this is the situation, this is the vast majority of my interactions. They're pitching a story. And so what do you see as the story for us? And the pitch, I'm saying, well, why would that, what's the story? And that's the issue. So there's no running out of the clock. You're pitching a story. I'm not seeing it. I'll tell you exactly what I'm not seeing and why. And if they don't address it, yeah, I'm moving on.
Your process for doing stories, is it mostly pitches you're getting? Is it mostly you pitching to editors, or is it editors coming to you with stories that they assign you? What's your typical flow?
Well, first of all, there isn't a typical flow. It's all of the above. And by the way, the first two options you gave are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
A lot of times people will pitch me something, and then if I think it's a story, I'll pitch it to an editor, and we'll go from there. So it's all of the above. It just depends on the situation, what we got.
What are the best ways people can get stories get your attention and actually work with you on a story?
Sure. Well, that's incredibly easy. The first thing is just what, excuse me, just what I said, which is if we're asking a question, directly answer it. Let me put this into a better context. There are three kinds of stories that I tell. One is my column. I do a column for Computer World, have done for like 12 years. So, there's a columnist. Now, that's an opinion column. I have to come up with all my own ideas. No one assigns me those topics. So, I'm always looking for an idea for my next column. Then there are features. Features are much longer. Generally, I might interview. This is not unusual for me to interview 9 or 10 people for a feature and end up quoting 5, 6, maybe even 7 of them. So there's those pieces. Then there's something that I'm doing a lot of these days, which is breaking news. Now, for a feature, we might have a deadline of 1, 2, 3 weeks. Sometimes it's been a month. Hey, I'm working on this for late October. What do you got? But for a breaking news story, it's literally hours. We saw this. I've got like 2 hours to file, maybe 3, depending. And I put out a blast. Anyone have any thoughts on this? And to get quoted in a breaking news story, to me, is incredibly simple. It's not a challenge at all, but there are a couple things you have to do. A, speed. I will honestly tell you, I will reveal the secret that when I put out the request at, I don't know, 9 a.m. New York time, if someone gets back to me with something relevant in 20, 30 minutes, they've got a far greater chance of my using it than if they get me something 3 hours later. What I'm looking for is relevant stuff. Now, if it's not relevant, it's not relevant. It's not going to be used. But I'm looking for just give me, the first 2 or 3 relevant comments. I'm good to go, and I'm going to finish the story and file it. So speed is critical. And I tell agency people, if you have got some problem children amongst your clients who are not particularly insightful, they're not great, breaking news is your salvation. Because if they're quick, and then all they have to do is we post certain questions, we will post a link to something. So it might be a court decision, it might be a product rollout, it might be a new compliance rule, but there's something that's happened that we're reacting to. And I'll generally put a link to it. So the first thing is open the link, read the document. Don't read the first 2 paragraphs. Read as much of it as you can and specifically comment on something 9 pages in, something that most other people wouldn't get to. You have a far better chance of getting quoted. It's like, so you'll say, hey, what the judge here said on page 8, that's really interesting. And this is why I say that. Boom, boom, boom. Now it's specific. The vast majority, and I mean 80%, of the responses I get are absolutely unusable, but I look at them and I go, you got to be kidding me. This looks like it was written by the client a year ago. It's blindingly obvious stuff. I can never tell our readers what they already know because they'll get angry at me. This is all stuff that our readers already know. And so it'll be like there'll be a court decision on some rule. And the rule will have to do with authentication. And they'll send me a piece. Authentication is very important. You need to know what are you doing here? You know that our readers know that. Respond specifically to something that was said in this decision, in this, whatever the news peg is, and say it's good or bad for the following reasons. And by the way, the following reasons are where you strut your stuff. That's where you say something. It's like, whoa, this person really understands the space. They understand the technology, not because they said it, but because they made an observation or an analytical thought about a particular detail in this news peg. They go, whoa, that is impressive. That's the whole goal. And the other thing is just take it up a notch in terms of quotability. So I said in the beginning, say this is good or bad for these reasons. You don't really say it's good or bad. If it's good, you say it's magnificent. This is going to change the entire space, and here's why. It's more quotable. Or if it's bad, it's never bad. This is absolutely horrendous. This is going to whatever, something dramatic. So take the quote up a notch and actually say something related to the peg. It's really not hard. Just focus on it. And I don't know what these people are thinking when they send us some generic thing, such as, compliance is important. Yeah, I think anyone reading a compliance story at our level would know that. So I don't get it. And they might think, well, maybe they'll use it, maybe they won't. There's no harm done. Yeah, there is. We're going to think less of your client. We're going to think less of you personally. We're going to think less of the agency. And you do that a couple times, and we just block you on our email. We don't even want to hear from you. So, yeah, sending over something blindingly obvious can hurt your client, your company, and your reputation.
Yeah, I've blocked so many domain names in my career. So I know what you're saying. It's the time wasted that really pisses people off.
And I just don't understand what they think they're doing, because I look at most of these and I'm going, this is not even close. There's nothing insightful here. There's nothing new. There's like, really? I don't get it, but
A lot of people are in your boat. Like, I don't get why they think that this was okay. It's something you mentioned a few minutes ago. Let's say you interview 9 people, you quote maybe 5, 6, or 7. What's the process like when those couple other people who didn't get quoted say, hey, how come you didn't quote me? I spent all this time with you.
Most people don't ask that because they know the mechanism. They've been doing this, things happen. So, I mean, there are some very low-level reasons that are true that are not particularly comforting to them, which would be, okay, you said some really good thoughts. However, I will, at the end of the process, I look at my notes and 3 other people made those same points. So I have a decision. Is that point significant enough that I should make it in the story? And if 3 people make it, I'm going to start wondering if it's too obvious to say. And I may not have any one of the people saying it because it's been said so often, it's that well known. But if I do choose to make that point, I probably will just choose the most interesting quote that makes that point. So what you said may have been fine, but someone else had a more effective way to say it.
What's your thought on AI and its effect on journalism in terms of the writing, the content, what the corpus is in terms of all this content that's being used to generate further articles? You're in the middle of that. We know newsrooms. I've talked to people who said, hey, we're using AI in our newsrooms because it can help us write, it can help us edit. And I know a lot of people who say, I'm not touching it. I want everything written by hand. Where do you fall on that?
Well, it really depends. AI is this vast category. So it depends. Now, I will tell you that I use spell checkers and grammar checkers. It's embedded into the word processors. So that's AI. Do I care? No. There's no reason not to. It flags something, and I will decide let that go or make a change. So I don't see any harm done with that. What you're pretty much hinting at is using it for much more than that, using it to write copy. And it's not really a worry that reporters will sometimes use it to help research. I use Google. It's not that far removed. But the fact is, I use Google to find something, but then I will find it, I'll check it out. So I'm not really exposed to hallucination. If Google finds something and the link is a dead link, that's the end of that, and I move on. So it doesn't cause any harm. The concern that is behind a lot of what you're saying is not what reporters will do, but what will publishers do? Will they start seeing a way to save money by having a lot of this content written that way? And what we're talking about is just raising the level. So one of the things that I do, I've got a very simple standard of what is a story. It's anything that'll surprise the bulk of our readers. And I mean that very literally. We define surprise, we define our readers, and that's very important. That happens to be a form of storytelling that no generative AI today can approach. Its very nature is repeating what's already out there. When you tell it, tell me something about authentication strategy that would surprise our readers, they have no concept because all they know is what's already been published somewhere. So a fresh thought or a surprising insight is not something they could do. Now, maybe 5 years from now, they'll be able to do it. But for the moment, I'm not worried about finding work, because the surprise takes skill and experience to deliver, and it's nothing that a generative AI can do.
But I was thinking about the same thing, right? It's basing on what's already been out there in its system and what it's read, but a surprise could be a surprise to me because I don't know everything that's already out there. So you could see an argument where, sure, it's out there and it repeats something, but it's a surprise to me, the reader, because my brain only had capacity for so much information. So this was new to me.
Well, this answers your question from the very beginning of our chat, which you asked, what is different in B2B? So our readers, for example, if we're talking cybersecurity, I do a lot of writing for CSO online. I used to do a lot for dark reading, but CSO pays a lot better. So the fact is that for those publications, our audience are essentially enterprise security. So we're talking about the CISOs or CSOs or CROs at Walmart, ExxonMobil, Nabisco, Chase, Citi, those folk. So the fact is, those people, and it's not even those people directly, although it often is, it's whoever on their team focuses. So if I'm doing a piece looking at a specific element of authentication, it's going to be read by people who oversee authentication strategy for, $50 billion companies. So for them, I'm pretty confident that if I've heard it, they've heard it. So I'm not worried about not surprising them, because, we have to look carefully. And that's the whole point. What can I say that would surprise our readers? And it involves knowing who our readers are, which is different than other people's readers.
Right. That's a good point, that your audience is the corpus. They in aggregate know everything already. So there's nothing that the Gen AI is going to be able to surprise them with. I appreciate that in B2B.
I wouldn't quite say they know everything, but they know a heck of a lot. And
Right.
and part of the problem is, once you understand, see, to me, surprise is a very concrete, it's a binary. People use the word surprise, they don't mean it. I mean it. So what we define surprise really simple. It's got 4 elements. 1, something the reader doesn't know. That sounds obvious, but you would be stunned how many people pitch us stories like, I know that. Of course our readers know that. So 1, it's got to be something that our readers don't know. 2, it has to be something germane, relevant to them. So for us, it would either be security or IT at the enterprise. And if it's not that, a lot of the pitches, that doesn't even relate to our readers. So that's 2. 3 is the big one, which is it's got to run contrary to the understandings, expectations, or beliefs of our readers, which usually means it's different or sometimes the opposite of what traditional conventional sources would mean. So for this space, that would be, does it run contrary to what is said by Gartner, Forrester, IDC, McKinsey, Accenture, Ernst & Young, or in the media side, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, Reuters? So if it runs contrary to what those people are saying about a particular topic, it'll generally work. And we'll get pitches all the time. It's like, what's contrarian about that? And the 4th element is, and it's a key one that is often overlooked, it is what we call behavioral change, which is, in simple words, it means our readers will do something different. They'll do more of this, less of that, stop this, start that. Because so many stories, you do this, okay, well, what will our readers do differently if what you're saying is true? Oh, nothing. Their current security apparatus covers it. Well, then what's the point of writing about it? If they already are covered, if it doesn't have a behavioral change, there's no point to the story.
I 100% agree with all of this. This is the same types of discussions that I'm having on my side, where you see companies and it's, oh, well, we agree with the trend that's already out there. It's like, then no one's going to talk about you. No one cares that you agree with the consensus view. That nobody wants to read about that.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the problem. Now, I will tell you, and this is where I do tough love with agency people, which is, I fully understand that depending on their situation, their agencies, their background, Many of these people do not have deep knowledge in a lot of the areas their clients cover. They may have different kinds of clients in different areas, so they can only go so deep given their specialty. I've tracked this area for 1 billion years, so it's a little different. So when we ask, what about this would surprise our readers? Candidly, a lot of the people pitching don't know. So I'm saying, okay, you've got tools to do this. So one tool, I mentioned it before, Google. So if you're pitching something and you think this is surprising, or your client's claiming it's surprising, do a Google search. If you come back with 50 publications have already referenced this concept, guess what? It's not surprising. It's nothing new. It's out there. It's been talked about. Move on. So that's the first step. Most of the pitches I'm given, it's like, did you even spend 10 seconds running this through Google? Because it would have been very clear to you right then and there that there's nothing surprising here. So that's one. And two, push back on the client. When they say it's surprising, really, and then actually read it back to them. Do you think this would surprise the CIO at Walmart? Oh, no, it wouldn't do that. Okay, then I'll ask it again. What can you tell them that would surprise that executive? So, sometimes just rephrasing it, and they'll realize, oh, well, this is not actually surprising. Okay, what have you got that is actually surprising?
I like it. I like it. How has your personal use of technology changed as you've just dug so deep into cybersecurity and all the skeletons that you know about in terms of how these systems work?
I mean, nothing that is particularly. I'm guessing what's behind your question. I mean, my technology changed. I've been, using a laptop for years, using a mobile phone for as long as they've been mainstream. So my use of technology has not materially changed. I do a lot of searches, but I'll do searches on Google. I'll do searches on Pacer, which is a legal database. So I do that, but I've always done that. So I don't think
That was I was going more to like, are you using a VPN? Are you avoiding Google? Are you avoiding certain kinds of big tech companies, certain social media, things like that, just because of the tracking or the nature of, hey, where's my data being stored and used?
So I use a VPN. In fact, we use 4 or 5 of them. Different clients to get into their environments require it. So we'll use it, but that's usually because the client tells us to. So there's nothing particularly magical. We do a lot of security things here, hardware firewall and a bunch of other things. So we've got a lot of protection because of the nature of what we cover, but it's nothing too interesting. It's pretty basic.
And then you mentioned, I think you said maybe CSO pays more than dark reading. What's the business model these days as a freelance journalist? Is it pay by word, pay by article, pay by, what is the format that is current right now?
It's all of the above. Every company has their own mechanism. There's no, I'm not sure how to answer that. It's like, well, it's like saying how to retailers on the planet deal with X and Y. Well, every way you can imagine. I don't have any concrete answer to that.
Okay.
I've seen different companies do it differently.
Because I've never been a freelance journalist. I was only, in this newsroom full time. So I've never had that side of the experience. I was just curious and I've heard different things because our outlets would work with freelancers and I'd hear, okay, this was a flat rate, or this was a per word, or this was a package of, okay, do 10 articles, or we'll hire you for a year as a salaried person, but you're still freelance. So I was just curious if there was anything trending one way or the other these days.
First of all, being a contractor, being a freelancer, and being on salary are kind of contradictory. For the IRS,
I said salary, but I meant, I meant like you're just going to get paid for the year, but you're a contractor, and you'll work like an employee, but you're a contractor. I've seen things like that.
I've done all of the above, all those examples with different companies. It just depends on what it is, what they need, and there's no one approach that is significantly more popular than the others.
I see. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Evan, I appreciate the time. That's great. I know you've got those deadlines to hit. I know you're very busy today, but I appreciate the honesty, the directness, the straightforwardness of like, we need surprises, right? We need something that's going to get people to pay attention, to be contrary, to be a voice in this ongoing
Well,
conversation in technology.
let me offer one thought, because
Yeah.
one of the and this crops up in conversations a lot. A lot of companies, they want to be seen as thought leadership. I want you to get us, we want to have a thought leadership position, but they don't have any thought leading thoughts. And I will not go into numbers, but a massive number of items are sent to me and someone has stamped thought leadership on it, and I will read the beginning of going, if this is thought leadership, it's not any, like, no. Thought leadership is you figured something out and no one else has yet to figure it out. That's thought leadership. When you tell me thought leadership and you then say things that I've heard 100 times, what conclusion would you draw about the level of BS coming from that person?
I agree with you. No, you're saying everything that I would say. How many emails are you getting a day with all these various pitches? I'm
Oh,
curious.
probably 140, 150.
My guess is 100 to 200.
Mm-hmm.
How many of them are you actually opening and even reading one line of?
Okay, I am not the norm. My answer is all of them. And the
Okay.
reason my answer is all of them is I don't know until I look at it. Now, there's a footnote to that, but in general, I don't know until I look at it whether there is anything there. Now, once I open it, I will scan it, and I've gotten pretty good at this. You can smell a bullshit pitch pretty quickly. So if there's something there that would be a story for us, you can scan it and see if there's anything there. But I mean, what are the lines that I use when we talk about surprise? And surprise is my big story definer. One of the things I have figured out is that I will say, just send me the surprise in 1 or 2 sentences. And then I get back 19 paragraphs. And I'm saying, all right, I'll read it because I'm a nice guy, but I know for absolute fact there's nothing there. Because if they had a surprise, they would have opened with and said, here is what would surprise the enterprise CIO. Boom, 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 boom. And then I pause and I say, okay, is that something I've heard? No. Have I heard people argue the opposite? Yes. Okay. If you can prove this point, that is a surprise. And then I read on. And if they
I
don't
see.
hit me with a surprise right away, it's like, I'm deleting it, because if you had a clean surprise, you would have led with it.
What about all these companies that are pitching out their momentum announcement or their little quote of some random thing that's not news, it's not a surprise, it's just a self-serving company announcement? Are you even touching that stuff?
Well, the answer is no, but I don't want that to be misinterpreted. That's just because right now, all of my current gigs, none of my people want that stuff. That's not in their area. There are other people for whom that's a wonderful storytelling and they would do it. It just happens for me, it's not, but that's because, no one who pays me wants any of that at the moment.
And let's say we'll use the number 100. You get 100 a day. I know it's more than that, but just for simplicity,
Mm-hmm.
you open all of them. How many are you responding to? And then how many of that 100 would you even actually pursue as a story?
Now, that's a very interesting question, because I've got to do a little dance. And the dance is I feel very strongly about responding and not ignoring people, not ghosting people. That's just something I just find repugnant. So I won't do that. However, if I look at an email, and you may or may not be surprised how easily one can tell if it's clearly this was sent to a large number of people. This wasn't an email to me. This was a blast. If I look at that and I say, this was a blast email, I feel no compunction to respond, because why would I? I mean, unless I see a story, which is pretty rare, but otherwise, if it's a blast, I don't feel an opportunity to respond. Now, one of the weird things is a lot of people will try, they don't do it very well, but they'll try to make a blast look like it's just for you. And I have no idea what's in their head. It's like, really, why would you do that? Because it's important to me to know, if I believe that you really sent this to me personally, I would be honored to give you a personal reply. So don't make your mass emails look personal, because I'm just going to assume everything from you is mass email. So I don't get why they would do that. I don't know why they think that helps, but
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's almost like just make it more clear if it's a blast or a personal email, because then your personal emails will get more value from me in the future.
now I'm not speaking for my colleagues.
Yeah.
Personally, me, I will respond if you sent it directly to me and it was a real email, and I'll tell you what I mean by a real email, then I will do it. So a real email is, yeah, I was talking with my client and they were thinking about X and Y. Do you think that would be a story here? Because it does blah, blah, blah. I will always respond to that. But if it's a pitch that's, even though they sent it to me, they also send it to 50 others and it has nothing to do with what I cover. Like, hey, this is a great new perfume, which I swear to God, I get a bunch of, whether it's, all kinds of consumer items. Like, this is not even close to what I cover. So even if they sent it to me directly, which I doubt, it's so irrelevant that I'm okay with ignoring it. That's a big thing for me. I don't like ignoring, but if it has nothing to do with what I have ever covered, I summon up within me to delete their message without replying.
I like it. I like it. I love this, Evan. I could talk to you all day because I feel like you're kindred spirits with me in terms of what's going on here in the real world. I appreciate your time today.
No, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.